I'm meeting today with licensed clinical social worker Pat Brehl. And before we talk about the subject you've chosen to address today, would you give people your contact information, please?
Yeah, you can find me online at www.dragonflyfamilytherapy.com, and you can find my phone number and email address right on that webpage.
Excellent. So what are we talking about today?
So I specialize in working with young children in play therapy and do attachment and trauma work. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about how do we help young children in therapy.
And before we went on camera, I spoke to you and said, I've heard of play therapy, but I don't really know what it is. And I know a little more about attachment, but I know many of our viewers, this may be their first exposure to it. So go ahead, start wherever you'd like about these subjects, and let's explain what they are and how people can benefit from it.
Okay, well, first of all, play therapy, I often have people wondering, well, why would I bring my child just to go and play with somebody? So I know it can feel a little uncomfortable and wonder like what would be the purpose of that. So play therapy is generally most effective for children between the ages of 2 and 10 years old, although I have used play therapy techniques with children younger than that and children older than that and even adults before. So the purpose of play therapy is working with the language of children. So children in that age range of 2 to 10, they're not yet at a point of abstract thinking, and so they're really more expressing and understanding their world through their play. Because if you think about typical talk therapy, you're using words as symbols. And so at that point in development, you don't yet have the abstract thinking to be able to express yourself verbally. So these children then have a way to express themselves through play, with play being their language and the toys in the playroom being their words.
Give me an example of something that play therapy would reveal that a child who's not very verbal couldn't just tell a therapist. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, it's a great question. So generally, children in play therapy, they're expressing kind of a few different things. One, they might be expressing things that they've experienced in their world. They might also be expressing a need, something that they're desiring and needing more of in their world. They may also be trying to solve a problem and trying to figure out how their world makes sense. So for example, I had a client many years ago, a 5-year-old, who would come in week after week and set up all of the baby dolls in the room for bedtime and constantly put them down to sleep. And he would even ask me that I was supposed to be going into bedtime as well, and always wanting to set up the place in a very calm way, and he'd even sing a lullaby to all of these baby dolls. What we learned is that he was expressing a need. This little guy had moved to 3 different foster homes in his 5-year-old life after he was removed from his parents' care due to CPS involvement. And what he was asking for that he couldn't say in words is that he really needed more nurturing himself and he needed more care himself. So that was his way of expressing it through his play.
Because if you'd have sat him down and said, something bothering you? He might have gone, I don't even know what that word
Yeah.
is. And if he did, like, something make you mad? Or, yeah, I didn't get a cookie. Like, well, yes, but that was like 2 minutes ago. Is it like in your general overall life? He wouldn't be able to know that abstraction.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, what is it about life? It's like, well, you mean like breathing? No, right? But then you see he acts it out, or he does things, and you're able to say, oh, this seems to be something that matters to him. It's important to him. Kind of heartbreaking story too.
Right. Well, and the thing with young children is that just the same if you've ever, talked to a therapist yourself as an adult or talked to a friend, sometimes you don't really know how you're feeling till you get to the end of that conversation. You sort of, as you're talking through it, you come to an understanding of, oh, well, this is how I'm feeling about it, and I just needed to talk it out. While children, it's the same thing. Sometimes they don't really know how they're feeling. They don't even know what the feeling words are to be able to label how they're feeling. So it's that process of play that we come to a better understanding of what they're expressing or needing.
What's the therapeutic part then? So that seems more like a diagnostic that you just described, right? Now we know what the child may be lacking, wanting, suffering from. Where does the therapy? I mean, so then do you say, well, let's put these baby dolls down for bed, and then say, wow, you're such a good kid? Or, do you see what I mean? Well, where's the therapy come in?
Yep, that's a really good question too. So the process of therapy is not necessarily that you're coming in to get fixed. And I think that's something that it's helpful for anybody to know when they're going for therapy for themselves, but also for a parent to understand for a child. I'll often have parents come in to me saying, this is something that is wrong with my child that I want this problem to be fixed. Or they might say, this is something my child's really struggling with and I don't know how to help them. And how can I help my child with this problem? So something that one of my gurus always talks about, that's Gary Landreth, and he's one of the gurus of play therapy. And he always talks about Clark Kent and asks, when did Clark Kent have the capability to be Superman? And the reality is Clark Kent always had the capability to be Superman. And it was really just that change agent for him was going into that phone booth and being able to change into Superman. The same thing with a seed and a plant. A plant always has the capability, or the seed rather always has the capability, the potential to become the plant. It just needs the right conditions in which to thrive and grow and become what it needs to become. So when we look at therapeutic process, we're not necessarily going in trying to tell child everything's going to be okay, because we don't know that everything's going to be okay. What we do go in and let them know is that I am here for you, I understand, and I'm listening. And so giving them just the space to be able to express and go where they need to go. There may be times that a child will put out an expression and I don't know exactly what they're expressing. I don't know exactly what they need. I don't know exactly what they're saying. But them having that space, they're going through that process themselves to get to where they need to go, the same way we would when we talk out a problem with a friend. So,
and you can recognize the progress they're making. So can you give me an example of what the boy that was putting the baby dolls to bed, did he work through some things?
Yeah.
How would that look to somebody that was watching?
Right. So what we look at when we're doing play work is it's not necessarily a one-time you'll see a big change. What we look for is themes. So this particular child, we saw this theme of week after week, and I was meeting with him, for an hour a week for several. I actually met with him for quite some time. He had a lot of underlying trauma as well. So this was not a short-term case. But with him, he was doing this nurturing theme for many weeks, probably about 5 or 6 weeks, with no change. So that became a theme. And then we started to see some change. So we started to see that he didn't need to put the baby dolls to bed anymore. And in this process, he's doing his work, and then I'm also working with the parents, and in this case, the foster parents, to help them get a better understanding of how to help him at home. And when he was stopping to doing that particular play behavior, there were changes in the home as well. Things got more stable in the home. They had set up some really good bedtime routines and rituals for this child, so he was getting some of that nurturing that he really wanted. And his relationships with others in the family were also helping.
So does that mean that when he would come in for the other play therapy sessions down the road, that he would come in and play with the fire truck?
Possibly.
And that would be so it doesn't look like this is something where he's trying to make up for the lack of attention by lavishing it on the baby dolls anymore. Now he's just kind of playing with a truck and having some fun.
Yeah.
Putting a puzzle together.
Yeah, he had something else that he needed to do.
Okay.
Another example, I had a child who was separated from mom for some time and then working on reunifying with mom, and wasn't feeling safe in the home yet and was still very fearful of mom going away again.
And that wasn't because mom was dangerous. Mom just dropped out for some reason. I would have guessed it was either because she went to jail or rehab or something like that.
Yeah. So there was addiction involved, and in her recovery process, she got to a very healthy place, was able to reunify with child. And so at first, child's play theme, so this was over several weeks, was constantly asking me to put together a home for him. he wanted me to build a house for him out of our Lego blocks or whatever we were using. And it was week after week having me do this. And so what we ended up being able to do is having mom in sessions with him and helping mom be able to understand that he still didn't quite feel safe and trust with her, but eventually was able to work on, instead of asking me to build his home, he was able to have him and mom build the home together. And so showing just that progress of trust in the relationship and being able to come to a sense of understanding.
On a slightly, how do you just not dissolve in a puddle of tears every day at work? I mean, these are such touching stories, either because they're so happy or they're so sad. And so how do you deal with that?
Well, that's a really good question. So I've worked for a long time in the nonprofit sector, and I've worked with a lot of cases of a lot of generational trauma. And when you read about these cases on paper, it just sounds completely devastating.
Generational trauma, there you go, got me again. So now I have this little boy putting little baby dolls to bed. I've got a little boy building a house with his mom who's been gone. And then I hear about generational trauma where you've got all these people that have just been ne'er-do-wells. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so not only has this child been separated from mom, but maybe mom has also had been separated from child. Maybe there was abuse. There could be all sorts of things. So on paper, you read about these children. You hear about them in those first phone calls and you think, how am I going to do this? And the thing is, you hear a lot about what we call in the field vicarious trauma, where you are working with a system, a family, a client who has just experienced such devastating things that you wonder, you start to feel some of that weight on your own as the therapist. The thing is, we don't talk enough about what has been coined vicarious resilience. And the thing is, just as you can feel some of the heartbreak and some of the pain of somebody who's experienced this trauma, you can also feel that resilience aspect of people that have just had amazing strength and courage in devastating situations. And just some of the strongest people I've ever met are people that have walked through my office doors. That very first phone call of being able to call up and say, I need some help, just takes tremendous courage. So that piece kind of feeds you.
It doesn't just take it out of you.
No, it fills you too. It feeds you too. And some of these kids, these young children that you work with, they teach you such lessons in mindfulness because they are so caught in what's happening in this present moment. Even though sometimes these kids are playing out things that have happened in the past, they're playing them out in this moment and looking at it in this moment. So they are great teachers and they have a lot of wisdom, these little people too.
Want to talk about attachment then? That's a good segue. Let's talk about
Sure.
that a little bit.
Sure. So when I look at family systems, I'm often looking at things through what I call an attachment lens, and trying to get a sense of, has this child with their guardian or caregiver felt both a sense that they have something that they can move away from and feel safe to go out and explore the world? And do they also have something that they feel when they're distressed they can come back to and seek reassurance and comfort? And oftentimes, the way that the parent is available to child is not just based on their love for their child. I have not yet met a parent who didn't love and want the best for their child, no matter what the situation. But sometimes there are other circumstances. Sometimes we'll have parents who have undergone a major loss. Maybe they've had a loss of a family member, maybe loss of employment, loss of stable housing, loss of health insurance, things that are really shaking their world and their system, and that's made them less available for their child. So maybe child isn't as able to return when they're distressed and have someone who is able to really engage and sensitively respond to that child's needs.
That surprises me. You mean you haven't seen any parents that are just kind of checked out emotionally in your career?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But that's because they're just bad people, not because they are dealing with a they're just words I won't. They're bad. They're just bad people.
No.
They they're indifferent to their children.
No, never seen that. I have never seen that. I've definitely seen people that are very much hurting themselves and have a hard time to be present for their child. I've seen parents that are so worried about their child being hurt that they have a hard time letting that child go out and explore. And they are just so anxious to want to make sure that their child is protected that they have a hard time trusting in the child's own capacity to go out and explore the world.
And how does the child perceive that?
Well, what often happens is child can then start to push away from parent and not be able to accept even the nurturing too. Start to feel kind of conflicted around parent and start to pull away.
This kind of seems like there's a lot of poles, aren't there? A lot of polar opposites. You can push a child away by being indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone, you bother me. You can push a child away by smothering
True.
the child.
True. Keep in mind, though, humans are biologically programmed. This is like an evolutionary trait for survival, biologically programmed to be attached to their parents. So there have been studies where we can't ethically do studies on humans, but we can do studies on rats and mice. And so
And those poor little monkeys.
And poor little monkeys.
'Cause I've seen the one I think you're talking about where they would...
Oh, I might be talking about a different one. This
like
one
the
is
monkey,
mice.
like the fake monkey with the bottle.
Yes. That's not the one I was going to talk about, though. But yes, that is a great example of an attachment
That's
video.
what I think about when I think of the poor monkey.
Right. So they had this study with mice, actually. So they started with a baby mouse, had a little maze, and they had like either really yummy cheese at one side, or they could just go to nothing on the other side. And so where do you think the little baby mouse would go? Go to the yummy cheese, right? Then they put a little electric shock in front of that yummy cheese. Little baby mouse tries to go to the cheese, gets the electric shock. Where do you think baby mouse goes the next time?
Either nowhere or to the other corner.
To the other corner, right? Because they don't want that electric shock. It's painful. They don't want to have it again. Well, then they replaced that yummy cheese with mama mouse. And the baby mouse is able to smell out mama mouse and gets the electric shock. And where do you think that baby mouse went every time?
To the other corner.
No.
No, to mom?
Every time to mom.
Even through the...
Through the shock. So the thing is that this mammal, just like humans are mammals, they are biologically programmed to stay in close proximity, to stay attached, to stay connected to their caregiver, to their parent,
even
for
if that
survival.
parent is not taking good care, or even if that parent is doing something the equivalent of an electric shock.
That's correct. So
that's why kids who are neglected or abused by their parents can still feel an attachment.
Absolutely, because they are biologically programmed to be with their parent. We are not sea turtles where we hatch and then we're on our own for existence. We are meant to be in close proximity with that parent.
Can I follow the analogy a little bit more then?
Uh-huh.
So, if a divorce lawyer or a judge is saying, well, this parent is behaving in a way that is the equivalent of the mild electric shock.
Sure.
Mild electric shocks are not necessary. Therefore, we will not have this child have any contact with this mild electric shock parent. I think you can see where I'm going with this. We might actually be doing that child a disservice.
Possibly, and this is where it gets complicated,
I'm not saying
right?
children deserve electric shocks.
Right.
What I'm saying is this child goes, well, yeah, I know there's an electric shock, but I still have a connection. I don't even know what it is, but I'll go through the electric shock to get to my mom.
Right.
And it's like, no, we're not. We're going to spare you the electric shock. Aren't
Right.
we wonderful? Like, no, you're monsters. Where's my mom? It's
Right.
like, but that mom does bad things to you. Like, my mommy, right?
Right. And it can put everybody in this tough predicament, right? And the thing is that sometimes we can help make that electric shock less so that it can be safe for baby to be with mommy,
Well, in
right?
this particular instance, that when you talk about the baby mouse, that shock was not lethal.
Correct.
It was merely, in fact, it wasn't even all that painful. It looks to me like it was just uncomfortable.
Sure.
And that mouse still said, but I got to my mommy.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't my mommy that was giving me the electric shock. So I think of it this way. mom's an alcohol abuser. She's not an alcoholic. In fact, she's a functioning alcoholic, if at worst. Well, that's not a good example to show a child. Sometimes the child sees mom inebriated, out of control, and I can, mom, dad, it doesn't matter. But, so we'll take the child away from mom or dad. But then the child grows up as an adult and says, I knew my mom was an alcoholic. I knew dad had these problems. But what you don't know is that mom, gee, I feel like I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. But, but mom loved me. I knew mom loved me. And I wanted to be around mom, and the state said no, because there's this one or two bad, aspects about this parent. And I was cheated. And now I'm an adult, and I'm all messed up, to some extent or another. You know what I mean? And so again, I'm not saying like, hey, you know what, just let the alcoholics be parents. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
But what do you see where I'm going? What do you say about it?
Well, and it's funny you bring up that particular example, because for the past 4 years, I've been the director of the children's program at House of Hope, where we do addiction treatment services for women and focus primarily on reunification services for these women, addiction treatment, and their children. And most often these children have been removed from others' care by the state due to choices made during the addiction process. Most often it's neglect issues.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
kind of the psychic equivalent of a mild electric shock.
Right.
They were neglected, not beaten.
correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
Okay.
And every case that I've worked with, again, I've said, all of these mothers have absolutely loved their children. And some of these mothers are some of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. And so it's just very incredible to watch this reunification process. Does it always work? No. Sometimes...
I was going to say, even the weak moms can still be loving moms. So even the moms that can't get their act together when it comes to the substance abuse still love their children.
Absolutely.
And the children still love their moms.
Absolutely.
Especially little kids who may not understand that's the only mother they know.
Yeah.
They think all moms are strung out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Well, and the interesting thing is that when we start to be able to do this work, of healing mom's trauma, if there is some, healing child's trauma, and healing that attachment relationship so that we can move to that security where child can both move away from and return to parent. It is the most fulfilling work there is. It doesn't always work. Sometimes we come to a place where we realize, parent is just not going to be capable of parenting this child.
Or, you see those shows where you got the child with the really bad attachment, and, and they're picking up butcher knives and standing in front of, the foster mom's bed or something like that, or lighting the couch on fire. Could I just ask you briefly, what has to happen to a child, assuming the child is not born with any kind of pathology? I mean, how little has to happen to mess a child up that bad? You see what I mean? I know we could probably find ways to really screw a child up if we tried really hard, but how, you know what I mean? What's the small...
Well, it could be anything. I will say attachment trauma can sometimes be the most devastating, where the person that you are biologically programmed to be with, who is meant to be your protector, is not able to do it, and may also be someone who's harming you. So I think of children who have witnessed domestic violence in the home, witnessing parents fighting, hurting each other. Children witnessing parents being arrested can be one of the most devastating traumas for them, seeing their protector being taken away.
Just the other day I saw a woman got hit in a crosswalk, just knocked down, broke her leg, but didn't, she was conscious, and she hobbled over to the curb and then fell down because I think the pain finally connected.
Yeah.
And her two little kids were standing there, and they just couldn't make sense of what was going on because their mom was lying on her side, crying, and I guess they either saw or didn't see the car hit her, but it was really sad because these little kids were like, at least this is my take on it. What is going on here? This isn't what mom does. Mom takes care.
Right.
Mom never cries. Mom never gets hurt. Mom's
Yeah.
never lying in the road. And again, she was lying on the side of the road. She worked
Yep.
her way over. So she wasn't lying in a pool of her own blood. I assume that wouldn't be an attachment problem. I guess it could if she got hit by a car every day. But
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. So,
You see where what I'm asking, right?
So one of my mentors, Douglas Goldsmith, he's over at the Children's Center and the director there, and he talks about that idea of the child's perception of the event is so important. So think of an example like what you're saying. So here we have a car accident where mother is immobilized in the car accident. She can't move her neck, she can't move her head. There's broken glass everywhere, there's big sirens, and child is in car seat in the back seat. So we think, looking at that, we're like, oh, it must be all of the scary noises, the ambulance, the broken glass, that must be the most traumatic, the blood.
Yeah.
That's the traumatic aspect for the child. The reality in this case is it was the fact that all of this was happening, but mommy was not there to take care of me. That was hard for child.
she was right there.
She was
and
right
not doing
there,
anything.
but couldn't do anything. So once that child was able to hear from mom, hey, Johnny, I was right there with you the whole time. I could hear you. I could hear you crying, and I was there with you the whole time. I just couldn't turn my body around to see you. But I was right there with you, and I was making sure that the ambulance, EMTs, everybody that was coming to take care of you. Once child learned that,
I was doing what they told me to do.
yes. Once child learned that, then that was no longer that marred attachment piece, right? Because they learned, oh, when I was distressed, I thought my mom wasn't there for me, but really she was.
So if you're gone away with rehabilitation or something like that, if you can come and sit down and say, oh, I wasn't getting away from you.
Yes.
I wasn't leaving you behind.
Yes.
I had to go someplace to get some help. I was sick and I needed to get better, but I thought about you every day.
Exactly. That letting children know that you keep them in mind, and that things aren't because they caused it, they can't control it, they can't cure it, that it's not about them. So even when we so we're talking about pretty severe cases,
Right.
of addiction and domestic violence, but I mean, we can even look at maybe just parents aren't able to be together anymore.
Right.
Their marriage has dissolved. There might not have been any major trauma in this system.
Mommy, Daddy, why were you gone for 3 days?
Sure, there
5
could be
days?
that too, yeah.
I didn't.
Right.
Why are you not living in the same house?
Right. So some of these young children, developmentally, they're so egocentric. The whole world revolves around them at this point in life. And so anything that happens in their world, they may also think that it is because of them. So I had a little boy once that when parents got divorced and daddy left, he thought it was because he was picking his nose at the table. And daddy never liked that he used to pick his nose. So then he had this horrible thought that I am the reason that daddy went away. Well, in reality, it had nothing to do with his picking his nose, as you can probably imagine. Mommy and daddy just weren't able to resolve their marriage, and they realized that they were better off separate.
And it must have been one time Dad says, like, oh, I can't stand to look at you. And then he realized, okay, he couldn't stand it so bad, he said, I'm going to put myself in a position where I never have to see you again.
Right.
Something like, oh.
Right. So helping children understand and making some meaning of their world, that it's not about them, that they didn't cause it, that can be a very healing aspect as well.
Well, thank you so much. We could talk about a lot of different things if we wanted to, but I think you've done an excellent job of giving us an overview. Play therapy makes a lot more sense to me, and I've been someone that's been exposed to the term a lot, but I've just never bothered to learn about it, so thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely.
And the attachment too, again, just very touching, very helpful. I'm sure there's parents watching this, and maybe even some children who might be adults, you know what I mean, or were children at one time, that might give them a little bit of insight into some of the dysfunction in the relationships they have with their own families or maybe with their parents. or whatever they're going through, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, before we finish then, would you please give the people that would like to get in touch with you your contact information one last time?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. And again, I'm at www.dragonflyfamilytherapy, and you can find me there. Again, it's Pat Brehl, LCSW.
Thanks again.
Thank you.